Hello there, and welcome back to Bullets for Bucks. My name's Stephen Bresnaugh, and today we're going to go over cheap bolt-action rifles or hunting rifles versus more expensive hunting rifles or bolt-action rifles. So, cheap versus expensive. What are the pros and the cons to an expensive bolt-action rifle or hunting rifle over a cheap bolt-action hunting rifle? So let's get started and dive right in. For an example, I'm going to be using, to start with, a Ruger American, which is not the cheapest bolt-action hunting rifle. There's Savage Axis, which is usually cheaper. TC Compass is usually cheaper, and so on. Let's go ahead and just make sure, visually and physically inspect, make sure the chamber is empty, so that we're doing this safely. Now, what you're going to find is on most cheap hunting rifles, in that especially $400 and under price category, or even maybe $500 and under price category, is that they're usually going to have a cheap polymer stock that's kind of hollow sounding. Usually it flexes at the forend. It's not super rigid material. And usually they're going to have some sort of rubberized recoil pad on them, which is fine. Usually there's no issues with that. Usually they're going to have a plastic trigger guard, either built into the stock or as a separate piece of polymer that attaches to the stock. And usually they're going to have some sort of detachable plastic magazine, or a magazine that is partly plastic and partly stamped sheet metal. Now, obviously, when you have a plastic or polymer stock such as that are found on cheaper hunting rifles, bolt-action rifles, you're going to have that flex where it can make contact with the barrel, which can cause inconsistencies and accuracy issues. You're going to have that tinny feel or hollow sound, that can maybe be louder when going through the woods. You're going to have that plastic trigger guard, like I just said, and that makes it susceptible. If you dropped it, maybe it would fall on a rock, or if you banged it off of something by accident, or had it strapped on a four-wheeler. There's a possibility for this stock to easily crack or break. Also, with the magazines, usually they're reliable, but sometimes they're just not as good a tolerances, as good a machining and whatnot, and so there can be problems with failures there as well. Then you're going to, sometimes all these things are going to add up, and then usually the bedding system is either a V-block bedding system, a cheap pillar bedding system where pillars are put into the polymer, or or sometimes there's not any real bedding system at all, except for just the receiver laying on top of plastic. And usually in cheaper bolt-action rifles, the recoil lug is going to be some separate piece of metal between the stock and the receiver that sits in the polymer. Now, all of those things don't necessarily make the cheaper hunting rifle inaccurate, but usually what I have found is they're less consistently accurate. So, for example, I had a Remington 770, and for 2 years of shooting it never shot good. It was horrible. And then it hit a sweet spot. For whatever reason, maybe it was torqued just right, or the barrel was just broken but just right, and it shot amazing groups. Now, yeah, the function of it was grimy and gritty, and the trigger was horrible, but I shot amazing groups with that rifle, but only for 1 year. And then guess what? I went right back to shooting horrible. So because the foundation and the quality of materials and the quality of the bedding job and the machining job and the trigger and all these things aren't as good, well, they usually can shoot very accurately. I found that they're not as consistently day in and day out over the longevity of the rifle as easy to shoot consistently accurate, if I can put that into words there. Usually the triggers aren't quite as nice. Usually they have a little more grit, a little more creep, a little bit more over travel, but not always. There's some very good budget rifles out there. And I'm a fan of the Ruger American. I'm a fan of affordable hunting rifles. But this is a comparison. So the materials aren't as nice usually. The machining job isn't quite as nice. For example, listen to this. Hear that zipper sound? That's the machining marks on this bolt and in the inside of the receiver rubbing on each other. Usually they're sloppier, the tolerances aren't as good. Then you move up to something a little bit more expensive. Now, this would still be considered a cheap rifle for many, but this is a Winchester Model 70 super grade rifle. And notice how there's zero machining sound or marks making sounds from the machining when I run that action. It's smooth, it's consistent, the tolerances feel tighter. It just feels better in the hand. Also, the receiver on this is all one piece, the receiver on this is all one piece steel, and the recoil lug is part of the receiver, and it's huge and it's hefty. There's not as many variables in the foundation of this rifle that are going to cause inconsistencies throughout the years. You have beautiful walnut wood, beautiful checkering. It looks better aesthetically. It probably functions and feels better, certainly. And while the Ruger American may shoot just as accurately, it's probably not going to be as durable and as consistent in the long run. Now let's take a look at this Howa 1500. It's about twice the price. This Howa HS Precision is about twice the price of the Ruger American. You can see this is a fiberglass resin stock reinforced with Kevlar. It's hand laid, has an aluminum bedding block built into the stock that marries to the receiver. The receiver is one piece steel with an integral recoil lug. So it's just going to have a lot better, firm, consistent foundation than, say, a Savage Axis or Ruger American. Also, the stock is much, much more rigid. It's very extremely durable stock. The barrel's free-floated, and when you push on it, you can't make this barrel make contact with this stock like you can on a cheaper hunting rifle. And while this one does have a little bit of machining noise, it's less than the Ruger American. It feels a little bit smoother when you run the bolt. It's less clanky. So the materials used, the quality in machining, the quality of craftsmanship, the way it's designed and put together. I mean, here you have a metal trigger guard, a metal floor plate. There's almost no polymer parts on this entire rifle, even internally. And on the Winchester Model 70, I haven't found any. I don't know if there is for sure, but I have not found one yet. So, cheap versus expensive. The more expensive one is obviously going to feel better. It's going to feel of higher quality. It's going to function probably a little bit more smooth. The trigger is certainly going to feel better. And while the cheaper rifle may shoot just as accurately, it's probably not going to hold up to the test of time like the more expensive rifle will. Hope you enjoyed this very brief comparison of a cheap bolt-action hunting rifle versus expensive bolt-action hunting rifles. If you did, go ahead and like and subscribe to my channel. I look forward to hearing back from you.